Boatworks today is sponsored by Total Boat and Alexseal Yacht Coatings, as well as supported by the generosity from the beautiful folks over on Patreon. Thank you so much. So welcome back, everybody. I hope you're all having a great weekend. My name is Andy with Boatworks today, and this week we're going to be glassing in the old keyholes on the transom, as well as going over kind of my plans or my thoughts on how I'm going to be using the Coosa on this transom. So with that said, let's just jump into it. So last week I had a number of people asking about the grinder that I was using, and specifically the paper. Actually, what I was using isn't really a grinder. Although I use it like one, it's technically a sander. I mean, that's what Festool refers to it as. It's their RO115, and unfortunately, they've discontinued this. There might be some more kind of floating around in surplus. You might be able to find them somewhere on Amazon or kind of other online retailers. Just until the stock is depleted, but that's what I'm using, and I actually love it. I do. Although I use it like a grinder, it's more like a low speed grinder instead of a high speed grinder, and it has a little bit of built-in dust collection. It works pretty well. It's not anywhere near as good as their actual sanders, but I'd say it probably collects maybe about 75% of the dust. So it's not perfect, but it does work really well. And I've, in the time that I've had this, I've actually run it through its paces pretty well. It's a gear drive, so it's going to hold up for quite a while. And I really like it. But like I said, Festool has discontinued this. I don't know if you'll be able to find it anymore. But if you can, it's probably going to be for a pretty good price. Now, as far as the paper that I use, it's actually Festool paper. Now, Festool has 3, 4, 5 different lines of paper. But the one that I use on the grinder, or the low-speed sander, low-speed grinder, is it's their Sapphire line, and it's a 36 grit. And it's a very, very heavyweight backed paper. That's why I use it on here. And I've gone through about a box of this stuff so far, and I have yet to have a single disc actually tear on me. Sanded on everything from jagged, edges of fiberglass. I've even hit some metal with it. And it holds up really, really well. It's such a heavyweight backer. It's almost like it's got a plastic backing on it. So maybe that's what holds it all together so well. But that's what I use on here. But when it comes to other lines, if I'm doing other tasks, like for example, I'm going to be switching over to a smaller sander, a little 3-inch here in a minute. And on that one, I'm going to be using their Granat, Granat. And I'm going to be using 40 grit on that, but this is kind of like what I would consider their medium weight paper. And I've had some tears with this, but whatever. What are you going to do? I don't have. If I had some of the Sapphire grade that would fit this size of the sander, that's what I'd be using. But I don't. Right? All I have is the Granat in their 40 grit. So that's what I'm going to be using here to kind of do the final cleanup on these keyholes. And lastly, and they have other lines as well, but is their Reuben 2. Now this is probably the one that if you're going to be doing any kind of woodworking, this is probably the one that you're going to be using the most. It's a lighter backing than the Granat, and it's still fairly heavyweight. I mean, I've used on my old fine sander. I don't recall the brand paper that I had or that I was using for that. Don't remember. Doesn't really matter, I guess. But that paper was literally paper thin. I mean, I was constantly tearing it, especially on fiberglass. So not the best, because once the paper tears, then you run the risk of actually tearing up the actual pad of the sander. So I like having these heavier weight papers just because they last longer, and they also protect the pad on the sanders themselves. So I hope that answers your question. Now looking at the transom here, as you saw kind of in the very beginning of the video, I did get the starboard side of this kind of cleaned out. I'm going to have a little bit of chisel work to do along the bottom, but what I want to get focusing on right now is actually cleaning out these keyholes. Now these keyholes were originally kind of filled in by the previous owner, the person that was doing the work on here before I acquired the boat. And they did all the filling or the skinning over from the exterior only. They didn't lay any glass really on the interior. They just took some, I don't know if it was pine or I think it's a type of plywood that they used, and just basically filled it in. So now when they filled in the keyhole from the exterior, they didn't quite lay in enough, so the outer skin is actually very, very thin. So I need to be really careful when I'm removing the balance of this plywood that's left in here in the keyholes. Now, I don't want to run the risk of actually chipping through because the outboard or the Armstrong bracket is still in place, and I'm really trying not to have to remove that just because I can tell it was put in with 5200, and it's going to probably do damage if I actually have to remove it just because of the caulking that they used. Don't ever use 5200. But anyways, so when I'm removing the balance of this wood here, I'm going to be sanding that out rather than coming in and trying to chip it out. Again, another big comment from last week was, I should get a like a pneumatic chisel or a sawzall or a chisel attachment for a sawzall, which would be great. And I might look into that at some point, but I don't do enough of that type of work to warrant purchasing one. So I don't have one. That's just why I haven't been why you haven't seen me been using one. But for moving the wood here, I'm going to try and get the majority of this bottom part done. I'm going to be using that RO115, the sander that I was just talking about. But when I get up towards the top here, because this area here is actually recessed compared to here, I need to use a smaller sander, something that can actually get inside this size area. And the 115 just isn't going to fit there. It'll fit down in that lower area, but not in the top. And for getting in those smaller areas, I'm going to use the Festool. It's their little baby sander. Now this is what, a little 3-inch little oscillating or random orbit. It also has a Rotex feature where the head literally just spins rather than oscillating and vibrating. I'm going to be honest, when I first got this, I wasn't quite sure how often I was going to use it, but it's being the size that it is such a handy little sander to have. I mean, especially for getting in small areas or if you're doing any little detail work. You have really, really good control with this thing. So, is it for everybody? Probably not. But if you do a lot of sanding in like awkward areas or awkward shapes or locations, it's a handy little thing. It also comes with a little triangle attachment, which I have yet to use. But for this, for what I'm going to be doing here, I think this is going to work out really, really well. All right, well, here we are. I got both the keyholes basically cleaned out and they're ready for glass. Surprisingly, I was able to use that RO115 for doing everything. I didn't think it'd be able to get up in here, but I suppose by the time I came in and I ran in my tapers all the way around, I was able to get in that tight spot. Now, one thing that I kind of ran into over on the starboard side here is when I was saying before that the glass that was laid up on here from the exterior was a little thin. I may have underestimated that, or I may have overestimated that. What you're seeing here in this blue, I suspect, I can tell by tapping it, but I suspect this is the fairing from the exterior. So basically on those areas where the blue is shining through, I actually sanded through all of the glass, but I didn't poke through the other side. I mean, who knows how thick the fairing is actually laid up on the exterior. But the only way I'm going to be able to get at that is to drop the bracket. And with what I'm going to be doing here with all the additional Coosa and everything else, I don't necessarily have to readdress anything from the exterior. I'm going to be coming in and basically building these keyholes back up so that they're pretty much flush with the surrounding transom. It looks to be it's going to be about 4, maybe 5 layers of 1708. And also, because I don't know what base that fairing compound is, if it's a polyester or an epoxy based, because of that, I'm going to have to use epoxy for all of the glass layup on here, just because I don't want to run into any kind of bonding issues. And well, I know using epoxy is just going to be the safe bet. Now there's also areas like this, these little low spots here and up in here. There's a number of them going all the way around. There's a little bit of a void right here. I may kind of hit that a little bit more. And the same thing is coming over on the port side. So basically what I'm going to be doing before I actually start laying the glass is I'm going to come in with some thickened epoxy and just kind of run a skim coat. I just want to fill in those low spots so that when I'm laying in the glass, I'm not actually trapping an air void underneath there. So the first thing I'm going to do is just lay in a skim coat. I'm not looking to get any build, per se, over the majority of the area with the thickened epoxy. I want to keep the epoxy to a minimum, but I do want to fill in those low spots. So let me let the dust settle a little bit here and then get things wiped down and let's start getting some epoxy mixed up. actually scratch that. I'm gonna get the templates made and get all the glass cut, because when I'm laying everything up here, I'm gonna be doing a wet on wet layup. So, template time. Now I'm going to be cutting all these pieces out with these electric shears, and I need glasses. I can't read this, what brand it is. But I will say, if I got this from Jamestown, if you're going to be in a project where you've got to do a lot of cutting, this is totally worth every frickin' penny. It beats the heck out of going around by hand and a pair of manual scissors. Money well spent. Now the epoxy I'm going to be using here is mixed 2 to 1, and I'm going to be using the slow hardener because, well, it's summertime and it's a little toasty in here. So I'm going to, first batch, just to get a feel for what kind of distance I'm going to get out of this, I'm going to pour out 8 ounces of resin and then 4 ounces of the slow hardener. I am going to have to work kind of quick because I don't like leaving a mix of this size just sitting in a cup. So I'm going to hustle here. Probably should have mixed up a smaller batch. If you're doing epoxy work for the first time, it is much better to mix up multiple smaller batches than one larger one, especially in these temps. But I'm hoping that because I'm using the slow hardener, it's going to work to my benefit here. But we shall see. If I start smoking, well, I guess Papa screwed up. And this is going to be the same epoxy that I'm going to be thickening for, I guess, filling in the low spots before I lay up this glass around those keyholes. So because I'm using the same base, and just because one is thickened, the other one isn't, because I'm using the same base, I can go wet on wet on wet without any issues. So that's the plan. And just to keep things simple here, I'm going to wet everything out right here on this bench because it's covered in plastic and it should all come up without issue. I have a little bit of epoxy left in the cup here, so I'm going to grab my silica, get this thickened up. I'm going to let this sit. This should be okay for 5-10 minutes or so, sitting like this. It's relatively thin, but I'm going to get this thickened, and then I'm going to fill in the keyholes, and then come back down and slap this brother in its place. sure someone's going to comment on this, that I'm glassing over these holes. And that's fine, because I'm just going to end up re-drilling these holes for when it's time to actually re-bolt the Armstrong bracket back on. So just because I'm glassing over these right now, it really doesn't make a bit of difference. Now, just in case there is some excess resin in here, I'm going to squeegee it out as well as work the air out of this lamination here, just using one of these little plastic squeegees. I could use a fin roller, but on 1708, this just seems to work a little better, and it's a lot easier to clean up. Truth be told, I'm just being lazy. There's a little bit of excess air in here, but not so much excess resin, surprisingly. 1708 is pretty thirsty. So on the second layup here, I'm not going to mix up as much resin because, well, the first batch it worked out just because I was able to thicken it and trowel on what needed to be done over the keyholes, but I don't need to do that on this second batch. So I'm going to do a smaller pour. Last time I did 8 and 4. I think this time I'm going to do 3 or 6 and 3. Now, before I close this out, I want to go over the layout ideas that I come up with on basically how I'm thinking I want to use the Coosa to make this area, or this reinforced area, a little bit larger. So let me get the camera set up and we'll walk through this. All right, now basically this part of the transom that I dug out, this part is actually flat, but as you get out more towards the port and the starboard side, now it begins to kind of curve a little bit because the actual back of the transom does have a slight curvature to it. So here's my plan. I'm looking at basically two sections of 1-inch Coosa laminated together that's going to be cut to this size right here. Now that's going to extend beyond this lip a little bit because this lip is about, what, inch and a half? Yeah, about an inch and a half. So it's going to extend out, actually less than an inch and a half, inch and a quarter. So it's going to extend out about 3/4 of an inch. So now when you look at it like this, if it comes out 2 inches, that puts it really, really close up to being even to this layer, or this section of the transom right here. And then I'll be able to, again, same thing coming up to the top here. So 2 inches coming out brings it really, really close to being almost flush with this, as well as this, all the way around. And then after that, what I'll be able to do then is I'm going to be, because this is curved, I'm going to have to find a way to take the remaining pieces of Coosa and bend them. Now, I'm not going to be able to do that with 1 inch thick material. So then what I'm going to be doing is taking 2 layers of 1/2 inch. I've got some 1/2 inch here that I was able to play around with, and I am able to get a pretty decent bend in there before it's glassed, obviously. So then the 2 1/2 inch pieces will then be going right over top of the 2 inch Coosa that we laid in initially. And then I'll have to do some filling to kind of make sure I've got a nice even curvature or sweeping layer to put the 2 1/2 inch pieces onto. But then I'm thinking, and I know there's going to be a little bit of dicking around to do this, just because there always is. But my hope then is that I'll be able to take those 2 1/2 inch pieces, slap those over the top of the 2 inch, and that will be able to conform all the way across. Now, unfortunately, I'm a little bit restricted on how big of an area I can actually make this. Just as an example, like looking over here, I really can't extend any farther than this area right here, but that's still giving me close to another foot of width on both the port and the starboard side. And when looking at it on the bottom, or along the top here, here's my hull identification number. This is, being 47, 48 years old, this is a vintage boat. I don't want to cover this up. So what I'm going to end up doing then is basically running the Coosa up to the top edge of here, right along this edge right here, tie this in. Now I can still lay glass over top of this because you'll be able to see through it. I just can't lay any additional Coosa over top. So basically what the end goal, or what the net result is going to be here, is that the actual coring itself is going to be about 3 1/2 inches thick when it's all said and done, because I'm going to be coming back in and laying about 1/4 inch or so of additional 1708 over top of all the Coosa. But it's going to be about 2 feet wider on the beam than what it currently was, as well as just probably a few inches higher. Now, that's not good enough for me. So then, looking down the bilge area here, I'm also, when all the Coosa is in place, I'm also going to be running some additional knees. Now, I'm going to run an additional knee, basically probably one coming from here up to support right in through here, one down the center, and then also the same thing over on the port side, extending from probably here and butting up now onto here. Now, as far as how to tie all this in with the flooring here. Now, kind of the tricky thing here is that this entire area, get this out of the way, this entire area here between here to there, I mean that's cut, it's wide open. Now I need to find a way to put in basically a ledger, or kind of a cleat, if you will, on so that I have something for this existing, or for the new sole to kind of rest on and kind of be able to glass in so that water can't just dump in here. So in addition to the knees, the 3 knees that I'm looking to install in the bilge area, I'm also going to be running basically a ledger, I don't know, arbitrary width, maybe say 3-4 inches wide. It's going to run at sole height right across the entire transom, and that is what the knee, and that's going to be basically bonded to the Coosa, and that's what the knees themselves are going to be glassed onto. So in addition to the 3 1/2 inches of Coosa and glass that's going to be in the transom, larger area, there's also going to be a reinforcement running right across. The sole on the back end is going to be able to rest on top of that, so that'll give me the support for that, and then the knees will be tying into there, and that will be tying everything in forward. So any stress that transom is going to be taking is actually going to be distributed further forward. And that's also in addition to the original stringers that are in here, originally from the boat, which are basically running right here and right here. So that's my plan. Let me know what you think. In my head, I can see it. It should work just fine. But if you have any other ideas, by all means, feel free to leave those down below in the comments. I'm always welcome to suggestions and also criticism, as long as it's constructive. So With that said, I think I'm going to be wrapping this up for this week. So, as always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, thank you in advance. If you have any questions, comments regarding the transom or anything else in general, you can leave those down below, and as always, thank you for your time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.
This has been a Boatworks Today production.